Hello, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to those of you who have never been here before. Let me pause there and reiterate in my introductory video to this entire vlog. I always wanted a portable studio, and I have one. It fits in a bag. I've seen other videos of people with studios that fit in bags, but the one thing I noticed as they are emptying the contents of their bag one at a time, eventually a MacBook will be pulled out. And while my iPad Pro is the same price as a MacBook, it is not the same footprint. It is considerably smaller, and so far it does all of the same things. I have also seen just as many videos of people who make beats with their iPad. That is a skill that I do not have. So that's what sets this vlog series apart, as it's for the songwriter who is not the beat maker. Today, in our series on mixing and mastering on the iPad, we're going to talk about leveling. We just finished talking about normalizing. Normalizing takes everything and says, here's the threshold that you have to be inside of. Ideally, normalizing would have gotten everything to be the same volume anyway. After we normalize, then we level. But the difference between normalizing and leveling is as we level, we're going to start adding things that weren't recorded to modify individual waveforms that we normalize. Today, I'm going to show you how I level a song in both Logic Pro and GarageBand. This video will actually be a combination of how to level your final mix in addition to both Logic Pro and GarageBand effects chains. A lot of professional studios will keep a clean track as well as a track with effects on them so that they can tweak the effects or swap them out altogether later. In an ideal situation, you would have recorded all of your tracks with the effects on them. When I record my music, I record everything clean and actually do my effects as part of the leveling process. There's a couple different ways to get your leveling done. All of them essentially do the same thing, and there's a couple steps that will happen regardless of which method you use. As I said previously, Logic Pro clearly does more than GarageBand. In my intro video to this series, I talked about how I use buses to add effects to multiple tracks at once. So this is where that comes into play. We're going to do this in a bunch of steps. It is one big step, but it's a step made up of smaller steps. So let's open up the song that we have been working on. This is a song that was done in less than an hour. It is completely original, but it is mainly all session player tracks synced up with the chord line. I got it done as fast as I did because I'm not playing anything but the main melody and the acoustic guitar part. So for the drums and the strings, we need bus mixes. So we're going to highlight the first of either of those, and we're going to create a summing stack. The difference between a summing stack and a folder stack just says, show me all of these tracks, yes or no. Summing stack lets you actually change things within them globally. I can tell you right now, GarageBand does not do summing stacks. We want to add a compressor to everything. My drums still sound electronic. There's some significant clipping in the bass. My lead part is not loud enough. My acoustic guitar is kind of aggressive. I like where the piano is right now. I can kind of barely hear it, and it sounds real. The organ sits nicely where it is, but I'm gonna mess with that. We're going to start by muting the lead line because we want to build from the back forward. Also going to mute all of the drums because those peaks are going to throw everything else off. I always start with the bass guitar. First thing we do, always, every time, forever, is add a compressor. Before the compressor, you can add a gate. And what that does is that says get rid of anything below a certain threshold. We can do a preset. Since this is straight bass, we're going to do direct bass. This out auto gain controls how loud it's coming out. You want your ratio for bass at like 4:1. This threshold is at what volume it kicks in. Basically, it will only kick on when it's peaking. After the compressor is when we start adding our actual effects. For the bass, I don't want it to sound like a raw guitar. I still want it to sound like an amp. I will use the stock bass amp designer. After the compressor comes the amp. After the amp comes the EQ. Let's check our frequencies to make sure nothing is weird looking. Now, you'll notice after I made all of those adjustments, it was orange before, but now it's going way above. Add a limiter. The limiter says don't go above 0 dB. So now this is not quite done. It still sounds very dry. Here's how we fix that. I'm going to add a new bus. So now it's playing in 2 places. But then on the bus, let's emulate a speaker there. I'm going to open up my purchased plugins. And Tone Stack Pro is my go-to place for speakers. Alright, so we come back over here to Tone Stack. This is what I normally do. I'll normally split this. I want to split by frequency, and I always do either 440 or 220. A is the lower frequency. So for A, we're going to keep the mic right up on there. And then for the higher frequencies where I want it to sound airy, or switch to the SM57, back it all the way off, and put it off to the side. So like I said before, the threshold is where the signal has to be for the compressor to decide to kick itself on. So here, I told it whenever the volume is too low, so that's where this threshold knob is all the way to the left, then you're going to turn that up. If I turned it all the way to the right, I'm telling it that if we hit that volume, turn it down. Now, since this is basically a mic signal, it's a simulated mic signal, I want a little bit of clipping. And that's where the chroma glow becomes essential. I want it super warm. We're going to put a different type of EQ on it, just so I can see what it looks like. So all of my low end is going to come from channel 16, but my bass finger A sounds, to make it sound like a real bass, is going to come from aux 1. After the bass is done, we freeze the track so that I don't accidentally mess with it later. And then, so I don't have to keep hitting play and stop, we're just going to loop this and move on to the next part. So I built my bass patch from scratch, but you don't necessarily have to. You could come over to the patches, and there's a bunch of stuff in here pre-built for you that you can just drag over. Let's say I really like what I did with this bass part here. I can right-click it and save it, and it'll put it to the left over here. Let me show you how that works for something else. So here's my guitar, my acoustic guitar. I have a patch I built for acoustic guitar. So if I go to my audio patches, this first one right here, I can just drag it there. And then all I have to do is figure out why it's so loud. I have a feeling it's this. Alright, so if it's too loud, and I can't figure out a way to bring it down without using this slider, I can throw a limiter on it and just bring down the limiter. And just that fast, the acoustic guitar is done. So I'll basically repeat that for every single instrument. Just the drums, I do something very specific with. You don't have to, because the kits that come in both Logic Pro and GarageBand, they sound pretty good. But let me show you what I do there. Alright, so 20 is our overheads. Alright, this is our kick drum, but it's super bassy. So this needs a compressor as well as a gate. Alright, so here's the actual beater. So the other one was what the mic would sound like inside the kick drum. This is what the mic would pick out outside the kick drum, and it's the sound of the actual drum beater hitting the head. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it, but then I'm going to paste just the plugins. There we go. And then when I play the two of them together, this is my ride cymbal, and these are my 3 toms. So what we're going to do is set up our summing stack. So that's why we saved this one from before. Create summing stack, and then we just start dragging stuff in there. Remember before, or in the last video, I said that I had rendered a few things that would normally be invisible? All of these drum tracks are one of those things. You see how it just updated all the top? I want to send this to the master output. Right. So now the beauty of the summing stack is once the drums are where I like them, I can just take the whole thing and hide it to work with my other stuff. We basically will just do all of that again for all of our other channels. So now I will run through that, and then I will see you in GarageBand. We are here in GarageBand, and you'll notice for Logic, all of our effects were at the bottom. In GarageBand, they are at the top in this menu right here called Effects. They still open up at the bottom, but they're at the top, and the individual options are over here to the left. So just like we did in Logic, we're going to start one at a time, kind of listening to figure out what do we want to do to them as we level them. I'm going to mute the solo and just work on the background tracks for now. Something else you'll notice as I select them, there is no preset menu here. So we have to do all of these by hand. GarageBand does the majority of the same things. So for both Logic Pro and GarageBand, what you basically want to do for all of your individual tracks is before your compressor, for your instruments that you need them super clean, like your cymbals, you want to put a gate, because it says everything below a certain threshold to shut it off altogether. To compressor, because it tells it at a certain volume, do a thing. So if we set the compressor low and then lift up the ratio, it'll say if it's below a certain volume, make it louder. If we set the threshold high and then set the compressor low, we'll tell it if it hits a certain volume, bring it back down. After the compressor, we want to do whatever signal modifications we want. So your chorus, your modulations, your distortions, your overdrives, whatever it is you want to do. I do a lot of tube EQ after your modulations and effects and whatnot. You want to put an equalizer so that you can make sure that your actual waveform is balanced. And then after the equalizer is where you're going to put your reverbs and your delays. But you want to pick a reverb and a delay that has its own equalizer on it so that you don't mess up everything you did before the reverb. Let's see what we have here. This highlighted track right here is my acoustic guitar. This one is the electric guitar, piano, synth pad, organ, all of my strings, all of my horns, the drum. This is the bass. So this right here is the bass. Let's do the bass first. So to solo in GarageBand, it's the headphone. Everywhere else, solo is an S for solo. But here, we're just going to use the headphones, and then we'll go in and start messing with it. So, like I said before, first things first is a gate, which is here. Something I do like about GarageBand is if you don't know how signal chains work, it actually puts them in order for you. So all that stuff I said before, if it didn't make any sense, GarageBand's already got it where you need it. So for my gate, we're just going to kind of feel it out. I think halfway is good. Then my compressor, you see how it already got louder? The bigger this number changes what it does. So if it was at 2, that means make it louder. Now that it's at 4, it's going to make it quieter. The attack is how long it takes it to kick in. The gain is the output. Sometimes you'll see after attack there'll be something called release. So attack is how fast it takes it to kick in. Release is how long it works for before it shuts it off again. There is no release here, but it would be in Logic. And then the mix is how much of the original signal do I want versus the compressed one. I just want the compressed one. Then my effects. So this effect EQ is different than my effects, so I'm going to turn that off and turn on the visual EQ, and there it is. The analyzer says, let me see it. Now this looks very similar to the EQ in Logic. So we don't want too much rumble, and we need a little bit more mid. There we go. Hear how it sounds dirtier now? That's what we want. Alright, and then this is done. Now in Logic, I could double this with a mic emulator for the speaker cabinet. I don't know if that exists here. So let's see if we can add it. Alright, it's not one of the stock options. However, you'll see this audio unit extensions. Those are my paid plugins. So if I come here and then select my Tone Stack Pro, we hear it already changed. So now I say done. Let's open up Tone Stack, and then let's put my speaker cabinet back. Now, since I can't double up here like I did in Logic Pro, have to actually mix it within Tone Stack. So I'm going to use the same bass compressor just to keep it from peaking. So the same thing for this compressor, it just looks a little bit different. This first knob is my threshold. So the higher I set this, the later it does whatever I tell it to do. So here's the release. Attack says I want it to basically kick on right away, and then release says I want it to shut off basically right away. And then my gain is how loud I'm going to have it be. So after Tone Stack, that's when I said I'll do my EQ. Also notice I only have a certain number of plugins I can use. Basically, I'm done after 7. I think I can get more in Logic. I was looking to see if we had a limiter, and we don't. No limiter. I could use this visual compressor that I paid money for. The takeaway here is for GarageBand, if we want it to do as much as Logic does, we basically need to buy additional plugins to add to it. So my bass sounds the way I like it. So just like in Logic Pro, I set up the acoustic drums so that even though a MIDI signal is going in, for every single drum, so bass, snare, hi-hat, toms, cymbals, there's multiple mics. There's a mic for the top where the stick or the beater would be hitting the drum, a mic for the bottom or the back where the resonation comes from, and then a mic inside, which is the actual tone. It looks like this is one of the tracks I couldn't fit, but that's okay because I actually have a bus mix for the drums here. This definitely has my kick drum, so this is the track that we need to kind of accentuate. So for this track, we're not going to do a noise gate because I need everything to kind of ring, but we are going to do a compressor. Now, reverbs in itself, you want to keep your ratio low. So when it's asking what percentage of reverb, I never go above 13. Unless I'm doing something ambient where I need it to sound super hollow. But you want the reverb just to make it sound bigger, not necessarily to make it sound different. Same with your delays. The feedback is how long the delay lasts, but the actual mix between the dry and the wet level, you don't want them equal. You want your wet level considerably lower than the dry. Otherwise, you're actually going to lose the clarity in the initial signal. Unless that's what you're going for. Like ambient music will use 3 and 4 different reverbs at the same time, and 3 or 4 different delays at the same time. So there are instances where you want heavy delay in reverb, but in those instances, just remember that you're going to actually lose being able to tell what the initial signal was. So we're going to set up our buses first, and then we add the compressors to the individual channels and the bus mixes instead of all individual channels. Once our buses are set up, this is when we're going to get into our individual effects chains per instrument. Now you'll notice that as I'm adding or subtracting or modifying effects, the track's loudness changes. This is what makes it leveling instead of normalizing. Normalizing brought everything to one set volume. As I add effects, things are going to get louder or quieter. Of all of the stages, normalizing is the fastest, leveling is the longest, and then mixing, you'll see, is when things start to sound intentional. As always, thank you for joining us, and may your gear be light, your latency low, and your dogs quiet while you track vocals.